I sat across from my parents at the polished mahogany table, the DNA test results spread before them like an accusation. Without waiting for their rehearsed explanations, I slid the resignation letter from the family company toward my father and placed my apartment keys beside my mother's trembling hand. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice steady. "The investigator I hired has already submitted evidence to the media. By tomorrow morning, everyone will know Victoria set up that hotel scandal, not me." My mother's face drained of colour. "Eleanor, please." "I've already signed with Hartley Enterprises," I continued, checking my watch. "My new position starts Monday. I won't be attending any family functions, and I've instructed my lawyer to handle all future communications." My father stood abruptly. "You can't do this to your sister." "The wedding is in 3 months." "The wedding to James." I gathered my purse, movements precise and unhurried. "The same James who helped Victoria frame me?" "I've already sent him the recordings of their conversations. He might want to reconsider his choice of bride." I walked out before they could respond, my heels clicking against marble floors I'd never see again. The story had started 6 months earlier, in what I now understood was my first life. Then I'd been the dutiful older daughter, believing family loyalty meant absorbing every blow they dealt. I'd stood silent while Victoria sobbed false tears about protecting her reputation, while my parents begged me to confess to a scandal I hadn't created. I'd watched my career crumble, my engagement dissolve, and my name become synonymous with corporate espionage and moral failure. And I'd taken the blame for documents Victoria had stolen and sold to competitors. I'd accepted responsibility for the hotel room photographs she'd staged with a paid actor. I'd signed the confession my father drafted, destroying any chance of defending myself legally. Then I'd died. Quietly. Alone 3 years later, in a small apartment far from the city. My health destroyed by stress and my spirit broken by isolation. The autopsy report, which I'd somehow seen in that strange space between death and rebirth, listed heart failure. But I knew the truth. I died of a broken spirit, worn down by years of carrying blame that was never mine. But I'd woken up again, 6 months before that terrible dinner, with every memory intact and a clarity I'd never possessed before. This time, I knew exactly what was coming. This time. And I refused to be their scapegoat. The moment I'd opened my eyes in my old bedroom, gasping as if surfacing from deep water, I'd begun planning. No dramatic confrontations, no emotional appeals, just methodical, careful action. I'd hired a private investigator the first week, not the firm my father had connections with, but a former federal agent named Patricia Reeves who operated independently. I'd given her Victoria's name, James's name, and instructions to document everything. "I need proof," I told Patricia in our first meeting at a coffee shop 3 districts away from anywhere I might be recognised. "Video, audio, financial records, whatever it takes." Patricia had studied me with sharp grey eyes. "This sounds personal." "It's necessary," I'd replied. "Can you do it or not?" "I can do it. But evidence gathering takes time." "If you're in danger..." I'm not in physical danger," I'd assured her. "I'm in danger of being destroyed professionally and personally by people who should protect me. I need ammunition to protect myself." Patricia had been thorough. Within 2 months, I had recordings of Victoria and James planning the frame-up in his car, their voices clear as they discussed which documents to steal next, and how to stage the hotel photographs more convincingly than their first attempt. I had bank statements showing payments to the actor, David Winters, who'd posed with me in those photographs, 3 separate transactions of $5,000 each. I had emails between Victoria and our competitor's acquisition team, negotiating payment for proprietary documents she'd photographed with her phone during late nights at the office. I'd kept working at the family company, playing the role of oblivious older sister while building my exit strategy. I'd networked quietly, reaching out to former colleagues who'd left for better opportunities. When Margaret Chen at Hartley Enterprises mentioned they needed a director of strategic development, I'd interviewed off the books. "Why leave your family's company?" Margaret had asked during our 3rd interview, her expression curious but not judgmental. "Because I want to succeed on my own merit," I'd answered honestly. "Not because of my last name. and because I've learned that family businesses sometimes prioritize loyalty over competence, and I prefer environments that value results. Margaret had smiled at that. We value results here, sometimes ruthlessly so. Can you handle that kind of pressure? I've been handling pressure my entire life, I'd said. I just prefer pressure that comes from legitimate challenges rather than manufactured crises. The offer had come through 2 weeks before my parents scheduled that fateful dinner, the one where, in my previous life, they had convinced me to shoulder Victoria's crimes. This time, when my mother called requesting I come home for an important family discussion, I'd known exactly what awaited. I'd prepared my resignation, hired the attorney, and scheduled the evidence release. I'd also done something my former self never would have considered. I'd reached out to James's parents. Robert and Catherine Mitchell were old money aristocrats who valued reputation above all else. In my first life, I'd been too devastated to think strategically. This time, I'd invited Catherine for tea 3 days before the family dinner. "Mrs. Mitchell, thank you for meeting me," I'd said as we settled into a private corner of an upscale hotel restaurant. "This is unusual, Eleanor," Catherine had replied, her posture impeccable. "Is everything all right with the wedding preparation? That's actually what I wanted to discuss." I'd slid a folder across the table. "Your son and my sister have been having an affair for 8 months. They've also conspired to frame me for corporate espionage to protect Victoria's image before the wedding. I thought you should know what kind of woman your future daughter-in-law really is." Catherine's expression had frozen, but her eyes had scanned every document with laser focus. The photographs of James and Victoria entering hotels together, the transcripts of their recorded conversations, the financial evidence of their conspiracy. "Why are you showing me this?" she'd asked finally, her voice carefully controlled. "Because I respect your family," I'd answered, "and because in 3 days I'll be clearing my name publicly. I wanted to give you advance warning out of respect and the opportunity to protect James from the worst of the fallout if you act quickly." I'd left without waiting for her response. But I'd known Catherine Mitchell would act. Women like her didn't tolerate threats to their family's standing, and Victoria had just become a liability rather than an asset. Now, driving away from my parents' house for the final time, I felt no triumph, only relief. The weight I'd carried in my previous life, that crushing guilt and shame, had never materialised. Oh, I had refused to accept their burden. My phone rang. "Patricia." "Everything's uploaded," she said. "News outlets have the full package. Legal has confirmed your documentation is airtight. The actor David Winters has already given his statement to police. Eleanor, you did good." "Thank you, Patricia. Send your final invoice to my attorney." "Already done." "And Eleanor?" "In 20 years doing this work, I've never seen someone handle a situation this cleanly. You should be proud." "I'm just tired," I admitted. "But thank you for everything." I ended the call as I pulled into the garage of my new apartment, one I'd secured a month ago in a different part of the city, lease signed under my legal name with no family connections. The space was smaller than my old place, but entirely mine. I'd furnished it slowly, choosing each piece deliberately. Every item represented a choice I'd made freely, without considering what my mother would think or whether Victoria would be jealous. Inside, I poured myself wine and opened my laptop. My resignation from the family company had been effective immediately. I'd spent the last month transitioning my projects to other managers, documenting everything carefully. They couldn't claim I'd left them in chaos. Every client relationship had notes. Every ongoing project had detailed status reports. I'd even recorded video walkthroughs of complex processes. The first news alerts began hitting my phone at 7 p.m. Corporate heiress framed by sister in elaborate scandal. Victoria Lawrence exposed in corporate espionage scheme. DNA evidence clears Elena Lawrence of all charges. I read through them methodically. Patricia's evidence package had been comprehensive. The journalists had everything they needed. Photos of Victoria meeting with competitor representatives in parking garages and quiet restaurants. Audio of her discussing the frame-up with James, their voices casual as they plotted my destruction over dinner. Financial forensics showing money trails I'd never known existed, payments flowing from competitors to offshore accounts Victoria had established. The actor David Winters had even provided a sworn statement. Patricia had tracked him down in another state and offered him immunity in exchange for testimony. He described exactly how Victoria had hired him through an intermediary, how she drugged my drink at a business conference with a sedative she'd obtained from a friend in pharmaceuticals, how she'd staged the photographs while I'd been unconscious in the hotel room. He'd felt guilty about it, he claimed, but the $15,000 had been too tempting to refuse. My stomach turned reading his account, even though I'd known the truth. In my first life, I'd never understood why I had no memory of that night. I'd woken in that hotel room with him beside me, photographs already uploaded to social media, my reputation already destroyed. I'd assumed I'd been drunk, careless. I'd believed their story that I'd embarrassed myself and the family. The not knowing had been almost worse than the scandal itself. The second wave of articles came an hour later. These focused on James. Mitchell Ayres' engagement called off. Following scandal, banking family distances itself from Lawrence controversy, Catherine Mitchell had acted swiftly. James's official statement claimed he was deeply disappointed to learn of his fiancée's deception and had ended the relationship immediately upon discovering the truth. The subtext was clear. The Mitchells were protecting their name by severing all connections to Victoria and painting James as a victim of her manipulation rather than a willing participant. I almost felt sorry for Victoria. Almost. Then I remembered the hotel room, the false confession, the 3 years of isolation that had killed me in my first life. My phone started ringing constantly. I'd changed my number, but a few people had it. Former colleagues, professional contacts. I let most calls go to voicemail, so listening to the messages later. Most expressed support. Several offered connections or opportunities. One former colleague, Daniel Park, left a message saying, "I always knew something was wrong with that scandal. You never made mistakes like that. I'm sorry I didn't speak up. I was a coward. You deserved better from all of us." His words touched something deep. In my first life, I'd been so isolated, so convinced that everyone believed the worst about me. Hearing that at least some people had doubted the official story provided an unexpected comfort. 3 messages were from journalists requesting interviews. I deleted those immediately. I had no interest in feeding the media circus. The facts spoke clearly enough. The only call I returned was from Margaret at Hartley Enterprises. "Eleanor," she said warmly when she answered. "Oh, I saw the news. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I assured her. "Better than fine, actually. I wanted to confirm. Does this change anything about Monday?" "Change anything?" Margaret laughed, genuine amusement in her voice. "Eleanor, you documented years of corporate espionage, hired independent investigators, cleared your name with overwhelming evidence, and managed the entire situation professionally before becoming anyone's problem. You're exactly the kind of strategic thinker we want. You handled a personal crisis like a military operation. Monday at 8 a.m. Sharp. We're lucky to have you." "Thank you, Margaret. That means more than you know." "Oh, and Eleanor, the executive team wants to take you to lunch on your first day. Fair warning, they're going to try to recruit you for every major project we have. You've made quite an impression." After we hung up, I allowed myself a small smile. In my first life, no company would touch me after the scandal. My name had become toxic, associated with poor judgment and corporate betrayal. I'd worked retail jobs under a fake name, lived in tiny apartments, watched my savings disappear. This time, I'd be starting fresh at a firm that valued competence over family connections, with executives who saw my crisis management as an asset rather than a liability. The weekend passed in surreal quiet. I didn't attend any family events. There was a Lawrence cousin's baby shower on Saturday that my mother had expected me at. In my first life, I hadn't been invited to family gatherings after the scandal. This time, I simply chose not to go. I spent the day instead furnishing my new apartment, and buying dishes and artwork that reflected my taste rather than family expectations. I chose bright colours where my mother would have chosen neutrals. I bought abstract art where the family home displayed traditional portraits. Every choice was a small declaration of independence. On Sunday, Victoria called. I almost declined, but curiosity won. Eleanor. Her voice was hoarse, raw from crying. Please, you have to tell them the truth. Tell them you lied. Tell them you made it all up. Tell them... I told the truth, I said calmly, my voice even. The evidence speaks for itself. Video, audio, financial records, sworn testimony from David Winters. The truth was always there, Victoria. I just made sure people could see it this time. This time? She latched onto the phrase. What does that mean? Nothing. Just that I learned from past mistakes. You ruined my she screamed, her composure shattering. James broke up with me. His parents won't even take my calls. The company is firing me. They're talking about pressing criminal charges. Do you know what this means? Do you even care? The company is firing you because you committed corporate espionage, I corrected, keeping my voice steady. You stole proprietary information and sold it to competitors. You also drugged and framed your own sister. These are consequences of your choices, Victoria, not mine. I did it for us, she screamed. You were always the perfect one, always the favourite. Dad gave you every important project. Mum bragged about you to everyone. I had to do something to stand out. I had to make them see me. I felt a distant pity. In my first life, I'd never heard this confession. I died believing she'd acted out of pure malice. But this was somehow worse. She'd destroyed me because she envied me. You could have worked harder, I said quietly. You could have developed your own skills. You could have built something legitimate. Instead, you tried to tear me down. That's not my responsibility to fix, Victoria. That's yours. And framing me wasn't going to make you more competent. It was just going to hide your incompetence temporarily. Eleanor, please. Her voice broke. I'm your sister. Doesn't that mean anything? It did, I said. In another life, it meant everything to me. It meant so much that I destroyed myself trying to protect you. But you never cared about being my sister. You only cared about competing with me. What are you talking about? Another life? Goodbye, Victoria. I ended the call and blocked her number. My hands were shaking slightly, not from fear or guilt, but from the finality of it. I'd cut the last thread connecting me to my old life. My parents tried next. My father left a voicemail, his voice thunderous with rage. Eleanor, you will retract these statements immediately. You're destroying this family's reputation. I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. Call me back within the hour or don't bother calling at all. My mother sent a text, her approach more manipulative. Sweetheart, please. Family comes first. We can work this out. Victoria made mistakes, but so did you by exposing this publicly. Come home. Let's handle this privately like we should have from the beginning. I know you're angry, but destroying your sister won't make you happy. I drafted a single response and sent it to both. I will always remember that family should have come first, when you chose Victoria's lies over my truth, when you asked me to confess to crimes I didn't commit, when you prioritised her reputation over my life. Don't contact me again. My father responded immediately. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, I typed back. No. The biggest mistake of my life was believing you would choose truth over convenience. I've learned from that mistake. I blocked both their numbers. Monday morning, I arrived at Hartley Enterprises 15 minutes early, wearing a navy suit I'd bought specifically for this fresh start. The building was sleek glass and steel, modern where the Lawrence Company had been traditional old money. The lobby had soaring ceilings and contemporary art. The receptionist greeted me by name, clearly briefed on my arrival. Margaret met me in the lobby personally, leading me through introductions to the executive team. Nobody mentioned the scandal. Nobody looked at me with pity or judgment. They saw me as I'd always wanted to be seen, as Eleanor, a strategic development director with a strong track record and clear competence. Eleanor, Richard Torres, the CFO, shook my hand firmly. Margaret's told us excellent things about your work at Lawrence Industries. We're thrilled to have you aboard. Thank you. I am excited to contribute. I hope you're ready to hit the ground running, he said with a smile. We've got a major acquisition in progress, and Margaret thought you'd be perfect for the integration strategy. My first meeting was a project briefing for that major acquisition. I contributed analysis on market positioning, drew on experience from my years at Lawrence Industries, and proposed 3 alternative approaches to the integration timeline that balanced speed with risk management. The room listened attentively. When I finished my presentation, Richard nodded thoughtfully. This is excellent work, Eleanor. Exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need. Welcome to the team. The weeks that followed fell into a productive rhythm. I worked long hours, not from desperation, but from genuine engagement. The projects challenged me. My colleagues respected my input. I started building professional relationships based on mutual competence, rather than family obligation. Nobody asked me to cover for anyone else's mistakes. Nobody expected me to sacrifice my work to make someone else look better. For the first time in my professional life, I was evaluated solely on my own merit. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. The media circus around Victoria's scandal continued for about 3 weeks before news stories overtook it. I watched from a distance as the fallout unfolded through news alerts and occasional conversations with former colleagues who reached out. The Lawrence family company lost 2 major contracts, clients who'd been unhappy about the espionage even before learning it was Victoria's doing. One client specifically cited lack of internal oversight and ethical standards in their termination letter, which was leaked to the press. The stock price dropped 18% before stabilising at a new lower baseline. Victoria filed suit against Patricia's investigative firm, claiming invasion of privacy and illegal surveillance. The case was dismissed within 2 weeks. Everything Patricia had documented had been obtained legally, and Victoria's own recorded confessions destroyed any claim of defamation. The judge's ruling noted that truth is an absolute defence, and that Victoria had no reasonable expectation of privacy in public spaces and business environments. James Mitchell quietly left the country, accepting a position at his family's London office. The engagement announcement was scrubbed from social media, replaced by careful silence from both families. I heard through professional gossip that Catherine Mitchell had given James an ultimatum: exile in London or being cut off entirely. He'd chosen London. My parents made one final attempt at reconciliation 6 weeks after I'd left. They appeared at my apartment building lobby unannounced on a Saturday morning. The doorman called up, and, against my better judgment, I agreed to come downstairs. Eleanor, my father said when I emerged from the elevator. His face looked older than I remembered, new lines carved around his mouth. We need to talk. We don't, I replied, keeping several feet of distance between us. You need to leave. The company is struggling, my mother said desperately. She looked haggard, her usually perfect appearance dishevelled. We've lost major clients. The board is questioning our leadership. We need you back. We'll give you Victoria's old position, make you VP of Operations. You can even have your own division. I have a position, I interrupted. One I earned without family connections. One where I'm valued for my work rather than my willingness to be a scapegoat. You can't abandon your family, my father insisted, his voice rising. Everything we built was meant to be your legacy. Victoria's legacy. This is bigger than one scandal. One scandal? I kept my voice level. You mean the scandal where your daughter committed corporate espionage? Where she drugged and framed her own sister? Where you both asked me to confess to crimes I didn't commit? That scandal. We thought it was better for the family, my mother began. It was better for you, I corrected. It let you avoid difficult conversations with Victoria about her performance. It let you keep pretending she was successful on her own merit. It let you maintain appearances while destroying your daughter. That wasn't about what was better for the family. It was about what was easier for you. We're sorry, my father said stiffly, the words clearly difficult for him. We made mistakes. but that doesn't mean you should throw away your entire future. I'm not throwing away my future, I said clearly. I'm building one without you, without the constant expectation that I'll sacrifice myself for Victoria's benefit, without the exhausting performance of pretending everything is fine when it's not. Eleanor, my mother stepped closer. Please, we're your parents. Doesn't that mean something? I studied them both. These people who'd raised me, taught me responsibility and hard work, then demanded I destroy myself for their convenience. In my first life, this moment would have broken me. I would have cried, maybe even wavered. Now I felt only tired finality. You were my parents, I said quietly. Now, you're people I used to know who made choices I can't respect. I understand you did what you thought was necessary, but I can't have a relationship with people who would ask what you asked of me. I won't apologise for that. I wish you well, but I won't be a part of your lives anymore. I turned to go back inside. Eleanor, my mother called, her voice breaking. Please, we love you. We're your family. I paused at the elevator, looking back one last time. Family shouldn't feel like drowning, I said. I'm choosing to swim instead. The building security guard, understanding my expression, positioned himself between us as I walked to the elevator. They didn't follow. In the elevator ascending to my floor, I felt my phone buzz. A text from Margaret. Board meeting went well. They approved your acquisition strategy. You're officially leading the integration. Congratulations, Senior Director. I smiled, genuine warmth spreading through my chest. While my parents had been demanding I return to clean up Victoria's mess, I'd been achieving recognition based entirely on my own capabilities. 3 months into my new position, I was promoted to Senior Director of Strategic Development. Richard Torres had called me into his office with a smile. Eleanor, your work on the Mercado acquisition was exceptional. The integration is ahead of schedule and under budget. The board wants to expand your responsibilities and your team. You'll be reporting directly to me as part of the executive leadership. The promotion came with a significant raise, a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and 3 direct reports to build my own team. At 32, I was the youngest senior director in the company's history. That evening, I celebrated alone in my apartment with expensive champagne and takeout from my favourite restaurant. No family dinner, no obligatory photos for social media, no pretending to be grateful for opportunities I'd earned myself. Just quiet satisfaction in an achievement that was entirely mine. I took a photo of the champagne glass against my window's city view and sent it to Patricia with the caption, "Thank you for helping me build this." She responded immediately, "You built it. I just provided tools. Proud of you." A few weeks later, I ran into Daniel Park, my old colleague from Lawrence Industries, at a professional conference. He approached with genuine warmth, no hesitation or awkwardness. "Eleanor," he shook my hand enthusiastically, "I heard about your promotion. Senior director at your age? That's incredible. Congratulations." "Thank you, Daniel. How are things at Lawrence?" His expression shifted carefully. "Challenging. We lost you and gained a lot of scrutiny. Your father's been personally managing Victoria's former accounts, but it's not going well. She's not with the company anymore, obviously." The board forced her resignation. "I heard," I said neutrally. "For what it's worth," Daniel continued quietly, glancing around to ensure privacy. "A lot of us knew. We knew Victoria was taking credit for your work. We knew she was in over her head on major projects. We knew the scandal didn't make sense with the Eleanor we'd worked with. But we didn't speak up, and I regret that. You deserved better from us. From me, specifically. I worked with you for 3 years, and I said nothing when they destroyed your reputation. That makes me complicit." The acknowledgement caught me off guard. In my first life, I'd believed everyone had turned against me, accepted Victoria's version without question. Knowing that people had doubted the story but remained silent was both validating and painful. "Thank you for saying that," I managed. "It means something now, even if it would have meant more then." "You're thriving now," he observed. "Hartley's lucky to have you. And I hope you know, several of us have given references for you. When companies called asking about your work history, we told them the truth about what kind of colleague you were. I didn't know that. Thank you, Daniel. It's the least I could do. Good luck, Eleanor. You deserve every success. As the conference continued, I noticed something else. People recognized my name now for positive reasons. The scandal had been public, but so had the vindication. I'd become known as the woman who'd refused to be silenced, who'd cleared her own name with evidence and professionalism rather than emotional appeals. Young professionals approached me for advice. Other women in business asked how I'd managed the crisis. I found myself becoming, unexpectedly, someone others looked to as an example of professional resilience. 6 months after leaving, I received an envelope at my office. Inside was a wedding invitation. Victoria was getting married to someone named Thomas Grant, a mid-level manager at a pharmaceutical company. The ceremony would be small, intimate, family only. No personal note, just the formal invitation, my name written in elegant calligraphy. I studied it for a long moment, thinking about the Victoria I'd once known. The little sister who'd followed me around as a child, who'd asked me for help with homework, who'd cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak. That girl had disappeared somewhere along the way, replaced by someone desperate enough to destroy me to achieve her own goals. I felt sadness, but no regret. I dropped the invitation in my recycling bin without responding. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. The same week, I closed the largest acquisition in Hartley's recent history, a regional competitor with technology patents that would position us as industry leaders. The deal had taken 4 months of negotiation, dozens of presentations, and careful relationship building with stakeholders who were initially skeptical of selling to a larger firm. When the contracts were signed, Richard invited the whole team to celebrate at an upscale restaurant downtown. The private room buzzed with energy, my team celebrating a success they'd worked tirelessly to achieve. At dinner, surrounded by colleagues who'd become genuine friends, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Contentment, not happiness exactly, but something deeper, a satisfaction, pride in work well done, confidence in my own capabilities. "Speech!" someone called from across the table. I stood, raising my glass, suddenly aware that this moment mattered. 6 months ago, I was in a different place, professionally and personally. I'm grateful to everyone here for seeing my work rather than my history, for building something meaningful together, for trusting me to lead this acquisition. Here's to the next 6 months being even better. The toast was met with applause. Beside me, Margaret squeezed my shoulder. "You earned this, Eleanor, everything you've built here. You walked in the door with nothing but your own competence, and look what you've created." That night, returning to my apartment, I paused at the window overlooking the city. The lights spread endlessly, representing countless lives and stories. Somewhere in those lights, my parents were managing a struggling company, dealing with board pressure and client losses. Victoria was planning a modest wedding, her grand ambitions reduced to quiet reality. James was overseas, rebuilding a reputation damaged by association. And I was here, in an apartment I'd chosen, with a career I'd earned, surrounded by people who valued truth over convenience. In my previous life, I'd thought family loyalty meant absorbing their pain, accepting their blame, sacrificing my truth for their comfort. I died believing love required self-destruction. Now I understood differently. Real love didn't demand you destroy yourself. Real family didn't ask you to confess to crimes you didn't commit. Real loyalty flowed both ways, built on mutual respect and honesty. The investigation had cleared my name. But I'd cleared my life. I'd chosen evidence over emotion, action over endurance, truth over convenient fiction. My phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. She still checked in occasionally, having become something like a friend through the shared intensity of the investigation. "Saw your company's acquisition announcement? Congratulations, Eleanor. You're doing exactly what I knew you would. Succeeding on your own terms makes the work we did together worth it," I smiled, typing back. "Couldn't have done any of this without you. Thank you for believing me." Her response came quickly. "You gave me evidence to believe. That's the difference between you and most people. You documented everything, stayed rational, built your case methodically. You saved yourself. I just helped with the paperwork. The past couldn't be changed, but the future remained unwritten. In my first life, I'd let others write my story with their lies and manipulations. This time, I held the pen myself, and the story I was writing looked nothing like the tragedy they'd planned for me. It looked like success, independence, and the quiet dignity of someone who'd refused to accept blame that wasn't hers. I'd been forced to take the blame once. I died under its weight, alone and broken. But I'd been given an impossible second chance, and I'd used it not for revenge, but for truth. The investigation had exposed the lies, but I'd built something better than vindication. I'd built a life worth living. A year after leaving, I attended a gala for women in business leadership. The event celebrated executives who'd overcome professional challenges to achieve success. I'd been invited as a guest speaker, asked to discuss strategic career development and crisis management. Backstage before my presentation, I reviewed my notes. The speech focused on evidence-based decision-making, professional resilience, the importance of documentation, and building support systems that valued competence over connections. 5 minutes, Miss Lawrence, the coordinator said. I took a deep breath, straightened my jacket, a deep emerald that made me feel powerful, and walked toward the stage. The audience represented hundreds of professional women, each navigating their own challenges and victories. When I reached the microphone, I looked out at their faces, attentive, curious, professional. Good evening, I began. A year ago, I faced a choice. I could accept blame for actions I didn't take, or I could trust in evidence, documentation, and truth. I chose the harder path, not because I'm particularly brave, but because I'd learned something important. Your reputation is worth protecting, but your integrity is worth more. I spoke for 20 minutes about building professional credibility, documenting your work, knowing when to walk away from situations that demanded you compromise your values, and the practical steps of hiring investigators and securing evidence. I discussed the emotional toll of fighting back against family, but also the freedom that came from refusing to carry someone else's shame. The applause afterward was sustained and genuine. During the reception, dozens of women approached me, some sharing their own stories of workplace challenges, others asking advice about difficult professional situations, still others simply wanting to express appreciation for my honesty. One woman, perhaps 40, with kind eyes and a firm handshake, waited until the crowd cleared. Miss Lawrence, she said quietly, I was in a similar situation 5 years ago. My business partner tried to frame me for financial mismanagement. I didn't have the courage to fight back the way you did. I settled, signed an NDA, walked away. I've regretted it every day since. My reputation never recovered in that industry. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. That must have been incredibly difficult. It was. But seeing what you did, how you handled it, you've inspired me to finally get legal advice about breaking that NDA. The truth matters, even when it's late, even when it's hard. You reminded me of that. She handed me her card. We spoke for another 15 minutes about her situation, and I connected her with Patricia's firm, knowing they'd treat her case with the same thoroughness they'd given mine. Driving home that night, I realised something profound. The scandal hadn't just been about clearing my name. It had become a story other people could learn from, a demonstration that standing up for truth, even at high personal cost, was possible and sometimes necessary. The life I'd built after refusing blame had become proof that surviving unjust accusations didn't require accepting them. You could investigate, document, expose the lies, and emerge stronger. 2 years after leaving the Lawrence family, I'd built exactly the life I'd imagined during those dark months of my first life. Senior executive at a respected company, professional recognition based on merit, personal relationships built on honesty rather than obligation, a reputation that stood without requiring anyone else's destruction. I'd purchased a larger apartment in a building with a rooftop garden where I grew herbs and tomatoes. I'd started mentoring young professionals, particularly women facing difficult workplace situations. I'd even begun dating someone, a fellow executive from another firm, someone who knew my history and admired how I'd handled it. His name was Alexander, and he worked in sustainable energy development. We'd met at an industry conference and connected over shared experiences of of leaving family businesses to build independent careers. My father wanted me to take over his manufacturing company. He told me over our third dinner. But I wanted to work on climate solutions. He saw it as rejection. I saw it as having different values. Did you ever reconcile? I'd asked. Eventually. It took him 5 years to accept that I wasn't coming back. But once he did, we rebuilt our relationship on new terms. Terms where he respected my choices even when he didn't agree with them. I'd smiled at that. Maybe someday. Right now, I'm content with the family I'm building. Friends, colleagues, people who choose to be in my life and who I choose in return. And somewhere across the city, in the struggling offices of Lawrence Industries, my family learned to live with the consequences of choosing convenience over truth. I didn't celebrate their struggles. I simply lived well, worked hard, and built something they'd never managed. A reputation that stood without requiring anyone else's destruction. That, ultimately, was the best outcome of the investigation that cleared my name. Not revenge, not public humiliation of those who'd wronged me, but the simple, powerful freedom of building a life untainted by their lies. I'd been forced to take the blame once. I'd refused. And in refusing, I'd discovered exactly who I was capable of becoming when nobody else's shame weighed me down. The investigation cleared my name, but I cleared my path forward. And that made all the difference. 3 years after leaving, I received an unexpected email from my mother, not through blocked numbers or surprise visits, but through my professional email, a boundary I could choose to accept or ignore. Eleanor, it read, I know you don't want contact, and I'll respect that after this message. But I wanted you to know that your father and I have been in therapy, working through what happened. We're not asking for forgiveness. We don't deserve it. But we needed you to know that we finally understand what we did to you. We're sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. We hope you're happy. That's all we want now. Mum. I read it 3 times, then saved it to a folder without responding. Maybe someday I'd be ready for that conversation. Maybe not. But the message itself represented something important. Acknowledgement that I'd been right to leave, right to refuse their demands, right to choose truth over their convenience. For now, that was enough. I closed my laptop and looked around my office. Awards on the wall, photos of my team celebrating successful projects, a window view that reminded me daily how far I'd climbed. I'd been forced to take the blame once. In a life I barely remembered except as a cautionary tale, I told myself. I'd refused, and in refusing, I'd built something beautiful. That was the real story. Not the investigation, not the scandal, not the dramatic revelations. The real story was what came after. A woman who learned that sometimes the most radical act of self-love is simply refusing to carry burdens that were never yours to bear. And I'd carry that lesson forward, in every decision, every relationship, every moment of my rebuilt life.